All right, English 12 for Thursday the 30th, last assignment of the week. Your previous assignment was to read 15, 16, 17 and respond to those prompts after hopefully you went to the web and found out some extra information. So I'll just go over that real quick. So hopefully you found out that, Booker T, his ideas about integrating into mainstream society is that the black community should kind of do things on their own, mainly through labor. He wasn't real big on them, getting an education or kind of, calling for them to be able to go to college and things like that. If you know anything about this era, there was another guy named W.E.B. Du Bois who argued the opposite. Okay, so a lot of people didn't kind of go along with what Booker T thought about how they should go about doing that in the early part of the 20th century. Hopefully you're able to, take a look at that colorism article I provided and just see, that there are issues within the black community amongst one another. And hopefully you were able to, find a couple of things there that you can apply to either Mrs. Turner. So remember, keep in mind that Mrs. Turner was probably part black. And then, of course, we know Janie is kind of a mixed bag with, her mom and her grandma. Okay. And then unfortunately in this chapter, Tea Cake, decides to rough up Janie a little bit for hopefully the reason that you found there. Okay, because we know Tea Cake's not a bad guy. So, why does he do that? Something must have set him off. So hopefully you said something about that in the second part of the question. What does that say about Tea Cake? Okay, does he have some issues? All right. So the materials for today, just the text. Okay, we're just going to read chapter 18 because it's kind of longish. I think it's only 10, 11 pages, something like that. And our focus here is going to be symbols again. All right. So something I haven't talked about because we're not in class is that essentially all the people and the situations that Janie has been in are symbolic. Okay. This whole book is really just a big analogy or metaphor for what life was like for the black community, during slavery, shortly after slavery, the beginning of the 20th century, and then, of course, maybe the future. And that's what you're going to kind of focus on for today. So let me just kind of walk you through this real quick. So Nanny/grandma, same person, right? She represents those slavery times, right? Do what the white person says, let me get you a house, let me get you, a man and be comfortable and you'll be okay. Okay, just know your place and don't try to get any bigger, which of course we talked about in last week's assignment with the whole high chair stool thing. Okay, and we know Janie has never really kind of, bought into that. All right. So then her marrying Logan Killix is kind of representative or symbolic of the post Civil War era, sharecropping era, right? Where essentially slaves go back to the job they were doing, only now they get paid a little bit. And it did not work out well. Hence, the marriage between Logan Killix and Janie did not work out well because essentially he just wanted her to work. Okay, she was maybe the third mule in that relationship. All right, so that's what he represents. So then running away with Jody Starks is kind of representative or symbolic of what's called the Reconstruction era, right? So, the South was pretty much destroyed after the Civil War, and the government, kicked in a bunch of money to kind of get things going again. So that's exactly what Jody does, right? He kicks in some money, they build their own community, and it goes good for the most part for some people, okay? But if you know anything about history, the Reconstruction era did not last very long. It wasn't kind of properly managed and things fell apart very quickly. So, it took Janie 20 years to leave Jody, I guess, after he died or to have to put up with him. But it started off great, ended poorly, just like their marriage. Okay, so that's kind of what Jody Starks stands for. All right, and now Tea Cake and the Muck are representative of the Harlem Renaissance. Okay, so again, this is a literary and art movement, an intellectual movement from the 1920s, and Zora Neale Hurston, like I said, is a huge figure in that scene. Okay, so Tea Cake and Janie being down on the muck is kind of like Zora Neale Hurston being in Harlem, where all these people are getting along and they're making music and they're producing art and they're writing stories and plays and poems and things like that, and everyone kind of gets along. Okay, but eventually that falls apart too. There's a bunch of infighting, and the thing just kind of unravels. All right. So what I need you to do is we got this hurricane coming, right? If you read for today, you know that there's Indians kind of picking up and moving, animals are moving, everyone's acting a little weird, and we know, the kind of destruction that hurricanes can produce, right? Because we've seen them in our own lifetimes. Okay, so what I need you to do here is try your best. All right, this is just gonna be a homework assignment, not a quiz assignment. I'll probably have a quiz assignment next week, just for the heads up. But what might the coming of the hurricane symbolize based on what the black community will face in their future? Okay, so let's think about this. So let's say it is 1910, 1915 or something in this story. We don't know. She never says. Okay, so the book is set in the early 20th century. All right, so you got obviously terrible racism, Jim Crow laws, things like that. Okay, you also have a lot of migration up to the north, people going to work in factories or just getting out of the Jim Crow South. All right, and then the book was written in the mid 30s. Okay, I think it was published in 1937. All right, so not quite to World War II yet or anything, but at the very tail end of the Harlem Renaissance. Okay, this is when things start to kind of fall apart. So what do you think Hurston is doing with this event, this oncoming hurricane, right? Some of the characters run, some of the characters stay, some of the characters sleep through it, right? So what is she trying to maybe warn her community? Think about, what happens to the black community over the next 20, 30, 40 years after this book was published. Okay, so into the 60s and maybe even into the 70s. All right, so connect those two things, the hurricane and what happens to the black community after this book was written. All right, again, do your best. It's kind of a tough question, but hopefully I've given you a little bit of background here to help you along the way. All right, see you guys next week.